The werewolf girl who sat with me during the power outage. How many secrets can a dark, rainy night unlock between two strangers, one of whom isn't quite human, and the other unknowingly holds the key to her world's survival? The sudden silence of the building felt heavier than the rain beating against Knox's window. He sat in the dark, a book forgotten in his lap, the power outage complete and isolating. Then came the tentative knock, soft but clear through the downpour. Knox rose, navigating the familiar layout of his apartment by memory. He opened the door. Wraith stood there, framed by the dim hallway. Her oversized sweater seemed to swallow her, but her soft gray fur accents were visible at her wrists and collar. Gentle golden eyes, wide with a vulnerability he hadn't seen before, met his. "Knox," she began, her voice a low murmur, "I know it's late. I truly dislike being alone when the power goes out, especially during a storm like this." He saw the tremor in her hands, though she tried to hide it. "Come in, Wraith, of course." He stepped aside, pulling the door open wider. She slipped inside, bringing with her a faint, clean scent like rain on dry earth. Knox moved to the small table in his living area. He found a striker and a cluster of candles. With a practiced flick, a flame danced, then another, then a third. The warm, flickering light pushed back the shadows, painting their faces in soft hues. Rain still lashed outside, but inside, a quiet intimacy settled around them. Wraith watched the flames, her shoulders easing slightly. "Thank you," she said, her gaze still fixed on the dancing light. "The quiet is disorienting." Knox offered her a cushion on the floor near the low table. "It can be. Makes you notice how much background noise we usually ignore." He settled opposite her, the candlelight between them. "Rough night out there." "Rougher than usual," Wraith agreed, finally looking at him. Her golden eyes held a depth he hadn't noticed during their brief hallway exchanges. "My species, we have a unique sensitivity to planetary electrical disturbances. It's an old adaptation, rooted in our home world's atmospheric particularities. These sudden surges or the complete absence of them can be quite jarring." She gave a small, self-conscious shrug, a wisp of gray fur brushing her cheek. "It's why I prefer company when the world feels off balance." Knox listened, genuinely captivated. Most people offered vague complaints about storms. Wraith offered an explanation rooted in something far more profound. He noted the way her fingers absently traced the rough knit of her sweater, a subtle tell of her discomfort. He saw the flicker of something ancient and resilient in her gaze, even as she spoke of vulnerability. "I understand," he said, his voice calm. "It sounds like a deep connection to the planet's energy." He didn't pry, just acknowledged. He found himself studying the subtle shifts in her expression, the way her brow furrowed slightly when she considered her words, the brief, almost imperceptible tension in her jaw. Her perspective on the storm as an energetic phenomenon rather than just bad weather was intriguing. Wraith offered a small, hesitant smile. "It is. Sometimes a blessing, sometimes less so." She watched him, a quiet curiosity mirroring his own. The warmth from the candles seemed to soften the edges of the room, creating a bubble against the storm. The silence that followed wasn't awkward but comfortable, filled with unspoken questions and a dawning sense of shared space. Knox found himself wondering about her home world, about the atmospheric particularities she mentioned. He felt a gentle pull, a desire to understand more about this woman who saw the world through such a different lens. Wraith, in turn, found a rare sense of peace in his quiet presence, his lack of judgment. His steady gaze made her feel seen but not exposed. The storm outside continued its fury, but within the small, candle-lit apartment, a fragile new connection began to glow. "My home world is called Lyraxis," Wraith began, her voice a soft murmur against the storm's distant rumble. She leaned forward slightly, as if sharing a secret only the candles could hear. "It's a place of constant atmospheric flux, vibrant with electrical currents that dance across the sky. Our people, the Lyrax, evolved with it, adapted to its unique energy signature." Knox listened intently, his gaze unwavering. He offered no interruption, only a steady presence that invited further revelation. We possess a natural sensitivity to these energies, she continued, her fingers tracing the rim of her mug, and a biological response to them. It's why sudden electrical disturbances here, like this storm, affect me so profoundly. She paused, gathering her thoughts. On Lyraxis, we adapt, we shift. Knox's brow furrowed, a silent question in his eyes. He considered the subtle hints of fur on her skin, the golden depth of her gaze. Wraith met his look, a faint smile touching her lips. It sounds fantastical on this world, I know, but it's simply part of our biology. We can alter our physical form, a process of energy absorption and redistribution, allowing us to thrive in Lyraxis's ever-changing environment. Sometimes we're mistaken for what your old legends call werewolves, though the reality is far more complex than any myth. A warmth spread through Knox's chest. It wasn't just the candle glow. It was the privilege of hearing such a profound truth offered with such quiet trust. He imagined the world she described, the constant electrical dance, the fluid forms of her people. It resonated with the ancient stories he studied. That's incredible, he said, his voice low with genuine awe. A living adaptation to a dynamic planet. It makes perfect sense in its own way. He considered his own work. I'm an archivist. I spend my days sifting through ancient cultural exchanges, forgotten histories, accounts of diverse species, lost civilizations, the subtle ways different worlds shape their inhabitants. What you describe feels like a narrative I've sought my entire life. Wraith's expression softened further. Your work sounds like a quest for understanding, then, a very Lyrax trait, in fact. She chuckled softly, a sound like dry leaves rustling. We value knowledge, connection, the deeper currents of the universe. And you found quite a few on this quiet world, I imagine, Knox replied, a hint of amusement in his tone. He felt a profound shift in their shared space, a bridge forming between their disparate realities. He wasn't just talking to a neighbor. He was conversing with someone whose very existence defied his world's understanding, yet felt utterly real, utterly present. This world has its own unique currents, Wraith admitted. Different from Lyraxis, but no less intricate. I've learned much, observed much, but there are always deeper layers. Her gaze became distant for a moment, then refocused on Knox, a flicker of something guarded returning. There's a reason I came here beyond mere observation, a purpose. Knox nodded, acknowledging the unspoken weight in her words. He felt an instinct to protect the fragile confidence she had placed in him. He understood the careful way she measured her revelations, the vulnerability beneath the extraordinary. Everyone has a purpose, I suppose, he offered gently. Mine often feels like preserving the echoes of others' purposes. He gestured vaguely around his apartment. These archives, these fragments of forgotten cultures, they all tell stories of survival, adaptation, the search for meaning. Wraith studied him, a quiet appreciation in her golden eyes. It sounds like you help ensure those echoes aren't lost. That's a profound purpose, Knox. Their conversation flowed, weaving between personal histories and cosmic implications. Each revelation from Wraith met with Knox's thoughtful questions and genuine wonder. He spoke of his childhood fascination with ancient star charts, of how he sought meaning in the remnants of interstellar empires. She spoke of Lyraxis's vibrant, ever-changing ecosystems, of the deep, almost spiritual connection her people had to their planet's electrical heart. The storm outside became a mere backdrop, its fury muted by the growing intimacy of their exchange. Just as Wraith began to describe the unique crystalline structures that formed on Lyraxis during peak atmospheric surges, a sudden, jarring pulse of energy ripped through the building. It wasn't the distant crack of thunder or the sharp flash of lightning that had punctuated the storm all night. This was an internal jolt, a deep resonance that vibrated through the floorboards and up through their chairs. The candlelight flickered violently, almost extinguishing, then steadied. Wraith froze. Her head snapped towards the rain-streaked window, her golden eyes wide and suddenly sharp. The subtle fur along her arms seemed to bristle, almost imperceptibly. Her quiet composure vanished, replaced by an intense, almost predatory alertness. "That was not the storm," she whispered, her voice tight, devoid of its previous warmth. She rose from her seat, moving to the window with an urgent grace, her gaze sweeping the darkened cityscape beyond. "That was an interference signature." Knox felt a prickle of unease, a cold dread replacing the comfortable warmth. He had heard the pulse too, distinct from the storm. He watched Wraith, sensing the shift in her, the sudden tightening of her entire being. The world outside, which had been a distant threat, now seemed to press in, carrying a new, more sinister current. The fragile connection they had built was suddenly tested, twisted by an unfamiliar external force. "They are here," Wraith stated, her voice a low growl that vibrated with an unfamiliar intensity. She turned from the window, her golden eyes fixed on Knox, stripped of their earlier softness. "That pulse was a probe signature. A Voidweaver vessel is close, disrupting your planetary energy grid." Knox felt a sudden chill, deeper than the storm's cold. "Voidweavers? What are you talking about?" He stood, moving cautiously towards her, his mind racing to process the shift from intimate conversation to cosmic threat. "My true purpose here is not merely observation, Knox," she admitted, her gaze unwavering. "I am on this colony settlement under an assumed identity. My mission is to locate and secure an ancient artifact, a living energy source known as the Resonance Conduit." His breath hitched. The name Resonance Conduit echoed in a corner of his mind, a whisper from his own research. "The conduit is vital for Lyraxis's atmospheric stability and by extension my species' survival," Wraith continued, her voice layered with urgency. "It is a nexus of raw planetary energy. Without it, our world slowly loses its electrical heart. The Voidweavers seek to seize it, not to sustain a world but to corrupt its power for destructive purposes across star systems." She glanced back at the window. The rain outside seemed to fall with an unnatural, almost rhythmic intensity, a percussive beat against the glass that felt too precise for a natural storm. Knox felt a jolt of recognition, a puzzle piece slotting into place with terrifying clarity. "The storm outside," he murmured, "it's not natural, is it? It's part of their interference." Wraith nodded grimly. "Precisely. A localized disruption designed to mask their energy signature and isolate their target. This building, this sector, is cloaked by their probe's field." A wave of dread washed over Knox, not for himself, but for the weight of Wraith's revelation. She was not just a visitor, she was a guardian carrying the fate of her entire world. He thought of her vulnerability earlier, how she had sought comfort in his apartment. It wasn't just a personal discomfort. It was a deep, instinctual response to a primal threat to her existence. "I believe I may know something about this conduit," Knox said, his voice quiet but firm. Wraith's sharp gaze snapped back to him, a flicker of surprise in her golden eyes. "My archival project. It's focused on cataloging obscure energy signatures from pre-expansion civilizations. I recently uncovered coordinates for a long-lost energy signature. It was listed as the Heart of Ethelgard, an ancient, almost mythical power source, said to resonate with sentient life." Wraith took a step closer, her composure wavering, replaced by a raw, unmasked hope. "Ethelgard. That is the Lyrax name for the conduit's first known sanctuary. You found it." Knox felt a strange mix of disbelief and vindication. His solitary work, often dismissed as esoteric, was suddenly critical. He, an archivist, held a key to an interstellar conflict. He had thought his research was merely academic, a historical curiosity. Now it was a lifeline. He felt the weight of it, the sudden shift from observer to participant. The data was buried deep within ancient colonial star charts, cross-referenced with geological surveys of this very settlement, Knox explained, the words coming faster now. It showed a unique energy output, far below the surface, stable but dormant. I'd always wondered what it was. A theoretical power source, I'd assumed. I have the schematics, the energy profiles, the approximate location. Wraith's emotional caution, a protective layer she had maintained since their first interaction, visibly dissipated. Her expression transformed, a fierce determination replacing the subtle fear. "Then our meeting was not coincidental, Knox," she whispered, her voice filled with a profound realization. "Your research unknowingly placed you at the heart of my mission. Your knowledge is essential. You are an unexpected, critical ally." He met her gaze, seeing not just the alien guardian but the vulnerable individual who had sought solace in his home. He understood now the true depth of her presence, the cosmic stakes intertwined with her quiet humanity. His isolated life had just been shattered, but not into chaos. Instead, it was woven into a grander narrative, a shared purpose that resonated deep within him. A warmth, stronger than any candlelight, spread through his chest. It was the warmth of belonging, of being seen, of an alliance forged not in battle, but in a quiet, storm-swept apartment. "My archives are at your disposal," Knox replied, his voice steady, reflecting a newfound resolve. He felt a surge of adrenaline, not from fear, but from the clear purpose now laid before them. Every piece of data, every coordinate, if it can help protect Lyraxis, then it is yours. Wraith reached out, her hand gently touching his arm. The subtle fur along her skin was soft, a surprising comfort amidst the growing tension. "Then we face this together," she said, her golden eyes burning with a shared commitment. The rain outside continued its unnatural beat, a reminder of the immediate threat, but inside, a new, formidable alliance had just solidified. Their destinies had converged, not by chance, but by a cosmic design that had quietly waited for this dark, stormy night. Wraith pulled her hand back, her golden eyes fixed on Knox. "The conduit is not merely an energy source. It is a living nexus, a heart for planets." Her voice dropped, a tremor of gravity in its tone. "It senses, it reacts. If activated correctly, it can restore ecological balance, heal entire worlds. If corrupted, if seized by the Voidweavers, it becomes a weapon of unimaginable destruction, capable of unraveling star systems." Knox felt a cold dread settle in his stomach. His archival research, a solitary pursuit, suddenly held the weight of cosmic consequence. "Devastation?" he asked, his voice steady despite the internal shock. "How?" "The Voidweavers twist life-giving energy into entropy. They would force the conduit to siphon the lifeblood from worlds, leaving them barren, cold." Wraith moved to the window, peering through the rain-streaked pane. "This storm, the power outage, it's not natural. Their probe has localized its interference, isolating this entire sector. They want an uncontested entry." Knox's mind raced. He had always seen the building as a collection of familiar spaces, a quiet sanctuary. Now it was a battleground. "They're trying to prevent any external interference while they work." He walked to his desk, pulling out a faded, rolled-up blueprint. "My apartment is on the 3rd floor. The conduit, according to the schematics, is deep below us, in an ancient sub-basement chamber, largely forgotten." Wraith turned, her gaze sharp, assessing. "We need to reach it before they do. Do you know how to get there unseen?" "I do," Knox confirmed, unrolling the blueprint across his desk. The flickering candlelight cast dancing shadows over the intricate lines. "This building was constructed over much older foundations. There are maintenance tunnels, service conduits, largely unused since the last major renovation cycle a century ago. My research included the original structural layouts. They're cramped, dark, but they bypass most of the public areas." He pointed to a section of the blueprint. "There's an access panel in the storage closet off the main hallway on this floor. It leads directly into a vertical shaft, then branches into a network that runs beneath the entire complex." Wraith studied the map, her brow furrowed. "The Voidweavers will detect standard energy signatures. Their probes spread like a neural net. Any movement through the main building, any activation of lights or lifts, would alert them." "These tunnels are unmonitored," Knox explained, tracing a path with his finger. "No sensors, no power grids connected to the primary system. They exist outside the modern infrastructure. They're a relic." A flicker of hope ignited within Wraith. "A blind spot," She tapped a section of the blueprint. "And this chamber, the conduit's location, is it sealed?" "Heavily," Knox replied. "It's designed to be self-sustaining, self-regulating. The schematic implies a biomechanical lock keyed to a specific energy signature. My data suggests a resonant frequency, a unique pattern. I have the sequence, but it requires a direct energy imprint." He looked at her, understanding dawning. "A Lyrax imprint." Wraith nodded slowly. "My people are attuned to such frequencies. I can provide the imprint, but I need to be close enough to the conduit itself. The Voidweavers will be searching every accessible level." "Then the tunnels are our only way," Knox stated, his resolve hardening. He folded the blueprint carefully. "We need to move now, before they establish a full perimeter." He felt an unfamiliar urgency, a surge of adrenaline that cleared his mind. His quiet life had prepared him for meticulous research, not for subterranean infiltration, yet he felt ready. He saw the path, the objective. Wraith's expression softened momentarily, a hint of warmth returning to her eyes. "Your foresight, your dedication to history, it has given us this chance, Knox. Few would possess such detailed knowledge of something so long forgotten." "It's simply what I do," he murmured, feeling a blush creep up his neck. The compliment resonated deeper than he expected. He was used to his work being obscure, unappreciated. To have it recognized as vital by her was a new sensation. He moved towards the hallway, Wraith following him closely. The air in the apartment felt charged, not just with the storm's lingering power, but with their shared purpose. The gentle candlelight flickered, casting their determined shadows long against the walls. Each step felt deliberate, a commitment to a shared destiny. Knox opened the storage closet door. Inside, shelves overflowed with forgotten cleaning supplies, dusty boxes, and a portable vacuum cleaner. Behind a stack of old paint cans, he revealed a faint outline in the wall. He pressed firmly on a hidden latch, and a section of the wall swung inward with a soft scrape, revealing a dark, narrow opening. A rush of cool, stale air drifted out. "This is it," he said, grabbing a compact, high-powered flashlight from a utility drawer he kept in the closet. He tested its beam. A stark white circle cut through the gloom. "It's a tight squeeze initially. We'll need to be quick and quiet." Wraith peered into the darkness. Her enhanced senses would be a double-edged sword in such a confined, unknown space. Every creak, every distant drip would be magnified, but her agility would be an asset. "Lead the way, Knox." Her voice was a low whisper, filled with a readiness he found both reassuring and exhilarating. She trusted him. He took a deep breath, the smell of damp concrete and old dust filling his lungs. He felt a surge of protectiveness, not just for the conduit but for Wraith. She was vulnerable here in this unfamiliar, archaic human construct. He had to be her eyes, her guide. He squeezed into the opening first, carefully navigating the initial descent into the vertical shaft. The flashlight beam danced ahead, revealing rusted pipes and ancient electrical conduits. "Follow my steps exactly," Knox instructed, his voice muffled by the confined space. "There are loose footholds." Wraith entered behind him, her movements fluid and silent despite the tight fit. She felt the chill of the uncirculated air, the vibrations of the building above them. The world outside, the Voidweavers, felt impossibly distant yet terrifyingly close. She focused on Knox, on the steady rhythm of his breathing, the careful placement of his hands and feet. His presence was a grounding anchor in the unfamiliar darkness. The faint, persistent energy pulse of the Voidweaver probe felt more distant here, muffled by the earth and concrete. It was a small mercy, a moment of reprieve, but she knew it wouldn't last. They descended deeper, the shaft opening into a wider, horizontal tunnel. The air grew heavier, the silence more profound, punctuated only by their soft footsteps and the distant drip of water. Knox moved with a quiet confidence, his knowledge of these forgotten passages evident in every precise turn and calculated step. He pointed out unstable sections, indicated handholds, and navigated around obstacles with an ease that belied the urgency of their mission. Wraith observed him, a deep respect growing within her. This quiet archivist who had sought only knowledge was now leading them through the literal underbelly of his world, a world about to face an existential threat. His courage was not born of brute strength, but of quiet determination and an unwavering commitment to what was right. It was a uniquely human strength, one she found herself profoundly drawn to. A faint metallic scraping sound echoed from somewhere above them, far off but distinct enough to cut through the silence. It was followed by a low, guttural growl, barely audible but unmistakable. The sound sent a shiver down Wraith's spine. The Voidweavers had found an entry point into the building. They were inside. The quiet sanctuary was now truly breached. Nox stopped, his head tilted, listening. His eyes met hers in the beam of his flashlight, a shared understanding passing between them. The stakes had just escalated. They were no longer just planning, they were actively being hunted. The hunt had begun. Nox lowered his flashlight beam, the soft glow barely illuminating the rough-hewn tunnel ahead. The guttural growl had been distant, but it echoed in the confined space, a chilling promise of what was to come. He gestured for Wraith to stay close, pressing himself against the damp rock wall. "They're inside," he whispered, his voice a low rumble, "closer than I expected." Wraith nodded, her golden eyes scanning the darkness. Her ears, more sensitive than his, twitched, processing sounds he could not perceive. A faint, almost imperceptible tremor ran through the ground beneath them. It was not the building settling. It was movement. Ahead she breathed, pointing a gloved hand. A patrol, 2, maybe 3, moving slowly. Nox adjusted his grip on the flashlight. "The conduit chamber entrance is just past that junction. We need to bypass them." They moved with practiced silence, a new rhythm settling between them. Nox navigated the winding passages, his archivist's memory mapping every turn, every hidden alcove. Wraith moved like a shadow, her steps light, her senses extended, a living radar for the approaching threat. She felt the subtle shifts in air pressure, the faint heat signatures, the low, almost subsonic thrum of Voidweaver energy. Around a sharp bend, a faint, sickly green light pulsed ahead. Nox pulled Wraith back, pressing her against the wall with him. Two shadowy figures, taller and more angular than humans, moved slowly down the tunnel, their forms indistinct in the flickering light emanating from their probes. They conversed in a series of clicks and hisses, utterly alien. "They're searching," Wraith murmured, her voice a low vibration against his ear. "Not just for the conduit, for us." The Voidweavers paused, one turning its head slightly as if sensing something. Wraith held her breath, her fur bristling imperceptibly. Nox remained utterly still, his heart thudding in his chest but his mind sharp, analytical. He noted the slight hesitation in the Voidweaver's movement, the way its probe pulsed in a specific pattern. It wasn't just searching, it was scanning. "They're looking for energy signatures," Nox whispered. "Our biological heat, anything out of place." Wraith knew her Lyrax physiology could mask some of her energy, but not indefinitely, especially after her recent exertion. The Voidweavers started moving again, closer this time, their grotesque forms filling the narrow passage. Nox spotted a small, dark recess in the wall, barely large enough for one person to crouch in. It was a ventilation shaft access panel, forgotten for decades. "In here," he urged, pushing the rusted panel open with surprising force. It groaned on its hinges. They squeezed into the cramped, dust-filled space just as the Voidweavers rounded the corner. The panel creaked shut, leaving them in absolute darkness, the alien clicks and hisses now directly outside, unnervingly close. Wraith could feel the faint energy field of their probes pressing against the metal, searching. Her hand found Nox's in the dark, a silent anchor. His skin was warm, steady. She felt a surge of raw protectiveness. She focused her internal energy, pulling it inward, making herself as still and cold as possible, mimicking the surrounding rock. It was an instinctive Lyrax defense, a temporary energy suppression. The Voidweavers lingered, their energy pulses sweeping the area. One of them rasped a command and the sounds began to recede, moving further down the tunnel. They had passed. Nox pushed the panel open again, letting out a slow breath. He shone his light into the empty passage. Clear. Wraith emerged, brushing dust from her sweater. That was close, too close. Their sensors are sophisticated, Nox agreed, his brow furrowed. But they're also methodical, predictable if you know what to look for. He offered her a small, tight smile. We learn quickly. They pressed on, the air growing colder, carrying a faint metallic scent. The tunnel opened into a vast, cavernous space. Nox's flashlight beam swept across ancient, rusted machinery, then found the center of the chamber. There it was, the resonance conduit. It was immense, a towering structure of crystalline growth, pulsing with a faint, erratic inner light. But it was not vibrant. Its glow flickered, struggling like a dying ember. Veins of dark, unnatural energy snaked across its surface, like parasitic roots consuming its light. Wraith gasped, a sound of raw anguish. The conduit was wounded deeply. She could feel its pain, a low thrumming lament that resonated with her very core. Her people's lifeblood was being drained. "It's weakening," she whispered, her voice tight with emotion. "The Void Weavers have already begun their corruption." Nox stood beside her, his gaze fixed on the dying light of the conduit. He saw the dark tendrils, the flickering pulses. "Can you stop it?" Wraith clenched her fists, her golden eyes burning with fierce resolve. "I have to, but they're here." From the far end of the chamber, a new sound emerged. A deeper, more resonant thrum. A group of Void Weavers, larger than the patrol, stood before another access point, their forms outlined by a sickly violet energy field. They were already working, drilling into the conduit's base, accelerating its demise. This was the vanguard, the main force. Wraith turned to Nox, her face a mask of determination. "They're trying to sever its connection, drain it completely." Nox nodded, his eyes darting between the Void Weavers and the conduit. He saw the subtle energy fluctuations, the points of stress in the ancient architecture. "We need a diversion, and a way to stabilize the chamber itself." "There's no time for diversions," Wraith said, her voice firm. "I must reach the conduit now. My energy is the only thing that can counteract their corruption." She looked at him, her gaze unwavering. "Stay safe, Nox. I will protect you as long as I can." He met her gaze, a quiet strength in his own eyes. "We do this together, Wraith. I've got your back." He pointed to a console embedded in the wall, half obscured by debris, one he recognized from his schematics. "There's a localized energy regulator there. It might control the chamber's field. If I can reroute power, I can buy you time." A roar erupted from the Void Weavers as they noticed the two intruders. Their focus shifted, their violet energy fields pulsing brighter, coalescing into primitive but powerful projectile attacks. Wraith didn't hesitate. With a primal surge of power, her form shifted, fur bristling, muscles coiling. She became a blur of motion, leaping towards the conduit, an agile, powerful guardian against the encroaching darkness. Nox, seeing her move, raced for the console, his mind already calculating the ancient wiring diagrams. The battle for the conduit had truly begun. Wraith landed with a growl, her transformed body a testament to Lyraxian adaptability. Her claws, now elongated and razor-sharp, deflected a violet energy bolt that sizzled against the ancient stone wall. The Void Weavers, a dozen strong, advanced with chilling synchronicity, their forms flickering like heat haze as they generated more projectiles. They were not merely attacking Wraith. Their primary objective remained the conduit, and she stood as its living shield. One Void Weaver lunged, its shadowy arm extending, attempting to bypass her and strike the crystalline structure. Wraith met it with a swift, brutal swipe, sending the creature skidding across the chamber floor. Its brethren recoiled, momentarily surprised by her ferocity, a primal strength they had underestimated. Nox reached the console, his fingers flying across the grimy, unfamiliar controls. The archaic interface was a labyrinth of glowing symbols and rusted levers. He remembered the schematics from his archives, the intricate energy pathways, the delicate balance of the conduit's power flow. The console hummed faintly, a dying gasp of ancient technology. He saw the main power conduit flickering, red warnings flashing on a small, recessed screen. The Void Weavers had already begun their sabotage, not just draining, but actively corrupting the energy flow, trying to turn its life force into a destructive force. He needed to reroute, to isolate the corrupted channels before the entire system failed. A blast impacted near Wraith, sending shards of rock flying. She roared, her golden eyes blazing, a protective fire burning within them. She moved with impossible speed, a whirlwind of gray fur and sharp intent, intercepting every attempt to breach her defense. Each successful deflection or counterattack cost her, though. She felt the drain of their energy attacks, the subtle weakening of her own enhanced form. She knew she could not hold them indefinitely. Her gaze flickered to Nox, hunched over the console, his brow furrowed in intense concentration. He was her anchor, her hope. She had to buy him time. More Void Weavers emerged from the access point, their numbers swelling, making a direct assault on the conduit. Nox gritted his teeth, sweat beading on his forehead. A large lever refused to budge. He remembered a specific pressure point from the diagrams, a counterintuitive sequence required to unlock the ancient mechanism. He braced himself, using his full body weight, pulling with a desperate grunt. The lever clicked, grinding into place with a shudder that resonated through the console. A section of the display flickered green, showing a partial reroute. Not enough. He still needed to stabilize the core frequency. The Void Weavers ignored him, focusing their energy on Wraith, who was now a single, formidable barrier between them and their target. Wraith was a blur of motion, her claws scoring deep gouges into the Void Weavers' shadowy forms. They hissed, their violet energy fields crackling, but they did not break formation. They were relentless, a wave of darkness attempting to engulf the light. One managed to slip past her, darting towards the conduit's base where the corruption was most active. Wraith twisted, her body contorting in a way that defied normal physiology, catching the creature mid-leap and slamming it against the chamber wall. The conduit pulsed erratically, its light dimming further, a faint moan echoing through the chamber, a sound only Wraith seemed to hear. It was suffering. Nox saw the conduit's distress. The screen on the console showed its energy levels plummeting. He fumbled with a series of ancient dials, his mind racing through calculations, cross-referencing the decay rate with the required energy input. The Void Weaver's probe was actively accelerating the conduit's corruption, a parasitic drain. He needed to flood it with clean energy, reverse the polarity of their attack. His fingers traced a complex circuit pattern on the console, remembering a forgotten emergency override that could potentially reverse the energy flow, but it was incredibly risky. One wrong connection could overload the conduit, destroying it entirely. A Void Weaver, larger and more aggressive than the others, broke through Wraith's defenses, its form solidifying into a more corporeal shape. It lunged at Wraith, its shadowy claws raking across her flank. She cried out, a sharp, pained sound, but immediately retaliated, her golden eyes flashing with renewed fury. Blood, a deep, rich crimson, stained her gray fur, yet she stood her ground, an unyielding sentinel. The creature, however, had created a momentary opening. Two smaller Void Weavers veered off, sprinting towards Nox's console. Their intent was clear: eliminate the secondary threat. Nox looked up, seeing the two Void Weavers closing in. He didn't have time to engage them. He had to trust Wraith, trust himself. He focused on the console, his hand hovering over the ancient override sequence. The risk was immense, but the conduit was failing faster than he could reroute. He had to chance it. He needed a direct surge, a burst of clean power to counteract the corruption. His eyes met Wraith's across the chaotic chamber, a silent communication passing between them. Hers was a look of grim determination, a warrior's resolve. His was a fierce focus, an archivist's precision applied to a cosmic problem. The two Void Weavers were almost upon him. One raised a shadowy arm, preparing to strike. Nox ignored them. He slammed his hand down on the override sequence, twisting a final dial, hoping his calculations were correct. The console groaned, sparks flying from its ancient wiring. The chamber lights flickered wildly, the air crackling with raw, unstable energy. The conduit pulsed violently, its crystalline structure now glowing an angry, unstable violet before collapsing inward on itself, a terrifying implosion. Wraith saw it, the conduit, her species' lifeblood, imploding. A wave of despair washed over her, chilling her to the bone. She unleashed a desperate, guttural roar, throwing herself at the approaching Voidweavers near Nox, her every muscle screaming in protest. This could not be the end. Nox, seeing the conduit's terrifying collapse, felt a cold dread seize him. Had he made a mistake? Had his attempt to save it just destroyed it? The console went dead, plunging his section of the chamber into deeper shadows, just as the first Voidweaver's shadowy claw connected with his shoulder. The battle was far from over, and hope seemed to be slipping away. The Voidweaver's shadowy claw tore through Nox's shoulder, a searing pain blooming across his nerves. He stumbled back, gritting his teeth, his hand clamping over the wound. The creature moved with unnatural speed, its next strike aimed at his head. He ducked, the claw whistling past his ear, and instinctively swung his elbow, connecting with something solid but yielding. The Voidweaver hissed, momentarily thrown off balance. Nox knew he was outmatched in a direct fight. His strength lay in his mind, his knowledge. Across the chamber, Wraith was a whirlwind of motion. Her roars echoed, filled with a primal grief at the conduit's apparent destruction. She deflected a volley of energy blasts with her enhanced speed, her claws tearing into the shadowy forms. Yet even in her rage, a cold dread gripped her. The conduit, the heart of her people, was gone. Or was it? As she fought, a faint, almost imperceptible tremor resonated through the chamber floor. It was not the Voidweaver's destructive energy, nor the building's structural collapse. It was a deep, resonant vibration, far beneath the chaos. Nox, struggling against his attacker, noticed something too. The space where the conduit had been imploding wasn't empty. A swirling vortex of pure, raw energy now pulsed, contained within the same spherical volume but far more compact, more intense. It wasn't a void. It was an incredibly dense point of concentrated light, vibrating with an impossible frequency. Had he truly destroyed it, or had he forced it into a different state? Wraith, he yelled, dodging another strike. Look, it's not gone. Wraith spun, her golden eyes snapping to the vortex. The despair in her expression faltered, replaced by a flicker of disbelief, then dawning comprehension. The low, deep resonance intensified in her senses. It was the conduit's core, compressed, distilled, its life force now focused into an incredibly potent form. It had imploded not to self-destruct, but to protect itself, to transform. Nox hadn't broken it. He had triggered an ancient defense mechanism. A cocoon state. Wraith gasped, her voice strained, a raw wonder in it. He forced it into a dormant core. The Voidweavers, however, were not deterred. They seemed to sense the shift, their attacks becoming more frenzied, now directed at the glowing sphere. They understood its potential, even in its compressed state. The two Voidweavers pressing Nox renewed their assault. The one that had wounded him snarled, its shadowy form elongating, its claws extending. What does that mean? Nox asked, stumbling as a blow caught his ribs. He felt a sharp crack, but adrenaline surged, masking the worst of the pain. Can it still be used? Wraith deflected a heavy energy bolt, sending it ricocheting into a Voidweaver, dissolving it into dust. Yes, but it needs to be awakened. It needs a massive energy infusion, a pure Lyrax imprint more powerful than before. Her gaze met his, a new resolve hardening her features. You didn't destroy it, Nox. You saved it by forcing it to adapt. Nox felt a surge of relief despite the throbbing pain. His gamble had paid off, but the cost was still high. The console was dead. He had no control over the chamber's systems, no way to help Wraith directly with power reroutes. It was all on her now. How do you awaken it? He asked, pushing back against his attackers, his movements slowing. He knew he couldn't hold them off much longer. I have to channel my full essence into it, Wraith explained, her voice urgent. Direct contact. But I need time. They will not allow it. She gestured to the surrounding Void Weavers, who were now converging on the glowing core, their shadowy energy tendrils already probing its surface. I'll buy you time, Nox declared, a fierce determination in his eyes. He saw the doubt in her golden gaze, the knowledge of his injury. I can still fight. You have to focus on the conduit. Wraith hesitated, her gaze flickering from the injured Nox to the besieged core. You cannot hold them alone, Nox. Not like this. I won't be alone. A new voice echoed through the chamber, surprisingly clear and strong despite the chaos. From the maintenance tunnel entrance behind them, figures emerged. Not Void Weavers. They were human, armed with hastily improvised energy weapons, their faces grim but resolute. It was the building's residents, led by a wiry maintenance worker Nox recognized from the ground floor. We heard the commotion, the worker yelled, firing a crude pulse blast that staggered a Void Weaver, and the energy spikes. We figured you two needed a hand. Wraith's eyes widened, a flicker of genuine surprise and warmth crossing her face. An unexpected alliance indeed. Nox, she said, her voice softer, your people. They're not just my people, Wraith, Nox replied, a small, pained smile touching his lips as he saw the residents form a defensive perimeter. They're our people now. He felt a renewed surge of strength, not physical but emotional. He wasn't fighting alone. All right, Wraith said, her stance shifting, her eyes fixed on the glowing core. Keep them away from me. I need to reach it and hold contact. She took a deep breath, her form shimmering, fur bristling even more intensely. Her golden eyes burned with an almost ethereal light. This will take everything. Nox watched her, a profound admiration welling up in him. He knew what everything meant for a Lyrax. It meant pushing her biology to its absolute limits, risking permanent exhaustion, perhaps even her life, to channel the immense energy needed to reactivate the conduit's core. But he also knew she would do it. He had seen her resolve, her unwavering commitment to her species, to their world. We'll protect you, Nox promised, turning to face the Void Weavers with the residents. His shoulder throbbed, his ribs ached, but his mind was clear. He would use every ounce of his strength, every bit of his knowledge to ensure Wraith succeeded. The true battle for the conduit had just begun. The implosion was not the end. It was merely the beginning of its rebirth. And Wraith, with her courage and his unexpected allies, would be its midwife. They faced an overwhelming force, but hope, once thought lost, now pulsed with the same fierce energy as the conduit's new core. This was their last stand. Nox lunged forward, his injured shoulder screaming in protest, but he ignored it. A Void Weaver, its shadowy form shimmering with malevolent energy, aimed a blast at Wraith. Nox intercepted, firing his own crude pulse weapon, a discarded tool from the maintenance worker, forcing the creature to stagger back. The residents, a motley crew armed with makeshift energy emitters and even heavy wrenches, formed a surprisingly effective barrier. Their blasts, though less potent than the Void Weavers, created enough disruption to keep the aliens from reaching Wraith. Hold the line, the maintenance worker bellowed, his face streaked with sweat and grime but his eyes burning with fierce determination. He parried a Void Weaver's clawed strike with a reinforced pipe, sparks flying. Wraith, meanwhile, knelt before the compact core. Her hands hovered over its surface, then pressed firmly against it. A soft, internal glow pulsed from within her, mirroring the core's faint light. Her fur rippled, growing denser, her canine features becoming more pronounced. A low growl vibrated in her chest, a sound of immense concentration and strain. The core responded, its light intensifying, flickering with an inner fire that pushed against the Void Weaver's corrupting influence. Wraith's face contorted in effort, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She was pouring her life force, her very essence, into the artifact. One Void Weaver managed to slip past the residents, its focus entirely on Wraith and the core. Nox saw it, a cold dread seizing him. He moved without thought, throwing his body in front of Wraith, shielding her. The Voidweaver's claw raked his side, a searing pain blooming across his ribs. He cried out but held his ground, firing a desperate shot that struck the creature's arm, making it hiss and recoil. Nox, Wraith's voice was a strained whisper, filled with alarm. She couldn't break contact with the core. "Keep going," Nox gritted through clenched teeth, pushing himself up, his vision blurring. The residents rallied, converging on the distracted Voidweaver, driving it back. They were fighting with a ferocity born of protecting their home, their shared existence. They might not understand the cosmic implications, but they understood defense. The core, responding to Wraith's unwavering will, began to hum with a deep, resonant tone. The light emanating from it pulsed stronger, casting the chamber in a brilliant, golden glow that pushed back the shadowy forms of the Voidweavers. Wraith's body trembled violently, her every muscle strained. She was a conduit herself, channeling the raw power of Lyraxis through her own being into the dormant heart of the ancient energy source. Suddenly, a blinding surge of golden energy erupted from the core, pushing outwards like a benevolent nova. It wasn't an explosion, but a wave of pure, harmonious force. The Voidweavers shrieked, their shadowy forms dissolving into wisps of inert, harmless particles as the wave washed over them. Their weapons clattered to the ground, lifeless. The malevolent interference signature that had plagued the building vanished, replaced by a gentle, steady thrum. The storm outside immediately quieted, the torrential rain fading to a soft drizzle. The oppressive gloom lifted, and a pale, hopeful light filtered through the vents high above. Then, with a soft click, the chamber's emergency lights flickered on, followed by the full, steady illumination of the building. The power had returned. Wraith collapsed, her hands falling from the now brightly pulsating core. She lay prostrate, breathing heavily, her fur receding, her form slowly returning to its more human-like state, though exhaustion etched deep lines into her face. Nox, his side throbbing, stumbled towards her. He knelt, his hand gently touching her shoulder. "Wraith," he whispered, his voice thick with concern and relief. She slowly opened her golden eyes, now softer, less intensely focused. A faint smile touched her lips. "It is done, Nox," she said, her voice weak but clear. "The conduit is reborn." The maintenance worker approached, his face beaming. "What in the stars just happened?" he asked, looking from the inert Voidweaver remnants to the glowing core, then to Wraith. Nox looked at the residents, then back at Wraith. "We saved our world," he said, a profound sense of accomplishment filling him. "All of us." Wraith pushed herself up with Nox's gentle assistance. She looked at the residents, her gaze lingering on each one, a deep respect and gratitude shining in her eyes. "Your courage was unexpected, yet absolute," she said, her voice gaining strength. "Lyraxis owes you a debt it can never fully repay." The worker waved a dismissive hand. "We just didn't like having uninvited guests trashing the place." But his grin was genuine. As the residents began to secure the chamber, ensuring the Voidweavers were truly neutralized, Nox helped Wraith walk towards a quiet corner. The powerful energy of the conduit now filled the chamber with a serene warmth, a stark contrast to the earlier dread. "Your schematics," Wraith said, leaning against the cool wall, "your knowledge of this place. It was all critical, more than you know." "And your courage, Wraith," Nox replied, meeting her gaze. His heart swelled, a quiet joy blooming in his chest, "your belief in something greater." He reached out, his hand gently taking hers. Her skin was warm, soft, and he felt a connection that transcended species or worlds. "What now?" he asked, his thumb tracing the back of her hand. "My mission is complete," Wraith said, her eyes searching his. "The conduit will stabilize Lyraxis. The Voidweavers will not return for a very long time. They underestimated the tenacity of your people and the power of a world united." She paused, a thoughtful expression on her face. "But there is still much to learn here on your world, about this unexpected alliance, about the resilience of humanity." Nox's breath hitched. "Are you saying you'll stay?" Wraith's smile widened, a genuine, radiant expression that lit up her golden eyes. For a time she confirmed. There is a quiet beauty in your world, Nox, and a warmth in its people, a warmth I found here with you. Her grip on his hand tightened. My purpose has shifted. It is no longer just about survival, but about connection, about understanding, about building something new together. He squeezed her hand, a feeling of deep peace settling over him. The storm had brought darkness, but it had also brought light. It had brought Wraith, and a destiny he never imagined. The archivist who once cataloged ancient histories now stood at the precipice of a future he would help create. Then let's start archiving that future, Nox said, his voice soft, filled with promise. He looked at her, truly seeing her, the brave Lyrax warrior, the vulnerable woman who knocked on his door, the partner in an interstellar romance born from a dark, rainy night. The universe was vast, full of wonders, but the greatest discovery he had made was the connection between them, woven into the fabric of shared purpose and quiet understanding.